Happy Easter, everyone. Welcome back to our live stream. So glad that you can make it and join us here this morning, Easter Sunday. It's just a real privilege to have you in this most unique of situations, but just an awesome time to be together nonetheless. I want you all to know that I see you out there in internet land this morning. I see you eating chocolate bunnies while you're listening to this message. I know that you have the Cadbury eggs out this morning. I also see the amateur haircuts out there today. You know, this has been going on for about a month now. I know how this works. Everybody's getting the clippers out and trying to do this on their own. Well, our message today is called Fingers Crossed. Is the best you've got? I hope so. And I'm sure you've seen some of our ads floating around on Facebook and Instagram and so on. Speaking of fingers crossed and amateur haircuts, I wanted to show you this picture because this is touching me very personally as well. This is my daughter Emma, and that's me, fingers crossed, the other night. She didn't do too bad a job, so, shout out to my daughter for that. So thank you very much, Emma. But it's just to show that we all have leaps of faith to make once in a while. So we're talking today about hope. That's what we're talking about. And I want to jump right into it because I got a lot of stuff that I want to share with you this morning. And first of all, let's just kind of look at what hope means. What is hope? We talk about it a lot, but have we really figured this thing out? The dictionary would say something like this. It's a feeling of expectation and desire for a certain thing to happen. And we know that hope comes in degrees, right? It's not like either it's a complete certainty or a false hope. There's a lot of kind of range in between. A strong hope we call an expectation. A weaker hope we call like a fantasy, right? Like we don't know if it's going to happen, but maybe it would happen. A stronger hope we would call an expectation. We're really expecting it to happen. But one of the things that we know about hope is that the need for it is universal. And you can find studies all over the place, psychologists that have really looked into this and tried to understand the whole dynamic of hope. And what we see is that you actually need it. Human beings need hope to live, to stay alive. We need hope. And so we talk about things like keeping hope alive. I've heard people say that even during this crisis that we're going through. You have to keep hope alive. This is how we're wired as human beings. But I got thinking about this as I was preparing for this message, and talking about the whole concept of hope. Does keeping hope alive really mean the same thing as just keeping these feelings of anticipation or of expectation coming, right? You know, like as long as I can keep those feelings coming, is that what hope is all about? I just need to, keep setting my sights on something else and keep moving forward, and as long as I do that, all is going to be well. Basically, the question I'm asking is, does it matter what you hope in? Does it really matter, or is it more just the activity that you're hoping? Well, I would answer that question this way. Does it matter what you hope in? I would say if all you're wanting is something to keep you in a good mood, then probably not. It probably doesn't really matter as long as it's something that you happen to look forward to. That, I suppose, could work. But if what you really need is the object of your hope, if you're in a situation where you really need this thing to come true, it's really important to you, and it's something that's going to really impact your life, then I would say, yeah, it really does matter. So I want to talk a little bit this morning. I'm going to give you two kind of terms that you can use to compare these two different ideas of hope, because we really have competing ideas. I'm going to talk about carrot hope versus solution hope. All right, so carrot hope is the first one. Carrot hope is that thing that's always out in front of you. It's the next promotion. It's the next vacation. It's the next relationship that you're going to enter into. And these hopes, often they're short-lived. They're kind of a placebo. Often they can be very vain or empty. And really, when you look at them, a lot of times they're just a distraction. There's something that keep you distracted long enough to get to the next hope, and you just kind of keep kicking it down the road. If carrot hope is legitimate hope, think about this, and if this is the kind of hope that you have and latch onto and affirm, you're basically admitting then that, alcohol to an alcoholic is the same kind of thing, that's a good thing. It's enough to kind of get them to the next time, and just kind of keep you moving through. At some point, everyone needs to take stock in what they're actually hoping for. And they need to ask the question, am I living for more than just distractions? Guys, that is a very important question that I wish that everyone would answer on this Easter Sunday. Am I living for more than just distractions? The second type of hope I'm calling solution hope. The solution hope is something that has substance to it. It's something that can actually give me a real sense of security. It's something that can actually cure the disease that I'm facing. It's something that can actually help me achieve the full purpose that my heart craves. These are things on a totally different level. And for this message this morning, I want to speak more about hope in this absolute sense, in this solution-oriented kind of sense. Hope that isn't just a short-term distraction, but something that sustains me through the long term. Well, looking for hope. As you can imagine, this solution type of hope isn't something that mankind just started looking for recently. This is something that human beings have craved for many, many, many years. We've been looking for hundreds, thousands of years. And as societies around the globe have evolved, moving past what we call subsistence towards self-actualization, the race to find this kind of solution type of hope has only intensified. For your information, this is what happens as societies progress, right? The opportunity for what we call self-actualization increases. We can spend less time just protecting ourselves from the cold and taking all this time to grow food to actually thinking about our lives and thinking about our futures and wondering why we're here and what our purpose is and trying to fulfill that purpose. That's what we mean by self-actualization. Now, incidentally, it's in the most developed countries of the world that we always find the highest rates of suicide. Always. And this is confusing to a lot of people, but it's all related to this whole question of self-actualization. Because the deeper you dig into this hope idea, what you eventually see is that the concept of hope, don't miss this, the concept of hope is always connected to the idea of purpose. They're always connected together. And in our modern societies, where we have the opportunity to actually try to find our purpose, to find that thing that really turns our crank, to find ultimate satisfaction, where we have the opportunity to do this and we come up dry, it leaves us staring out into the abyss. And a lot of people, they can't handle that. They become hopeless. Well, note this, guys. Whatever you claim to be hoping in, it needs to answer the purpose question. What is my purpose? Why am I here? What am I doing? Let's talk a little bit about the history of purpose and hope, these two concepts that are really tied together. If you study history, you'll actually see that there was a collective worldwide awakening to the ideas of hope and purpose. It's really interesting if you study it out. You'll see that there was a clear awakening that happened somewhere around 500 BC. A whole lot of things started converging all over the world, the known world at that time, all at the same time. The first thing would be the Hindu synthesis. What we're talking about here is this coming together of a lot of Vedic teachings and traditions that sort of became synthesized and, became more formulated into, more religious thought and something that a lot of people would grasp onto. The life of Buddha was around 500, and the rise of Buddhism started from that point on. Religious philosophies like the Rata and Brahman in Hinduism, and then also Tao started emerging. All of these things trying to identify universal principles of purpose. This consciousness was also emerging further in the East. The teachings of the Hebrew Scriptures had gained popularity, this idea of monotheism and Yahweh and the Word of Yahweh that was, both this creating force that created the cosmos, but also the personification of wisdom. These ideas were catching on. And then a guy named Heraclitus, a Greek philosopher right around 500 BC, popularized the term the Logos. And he said that all entities come to be in accordance with this logos. It means like word or reason. We get our word logic from it. And he said this was like this principle that everything turned around, everything tied into it. If you could find your purpose, wow, what a source of hope this would be. And the Stoic philosophers that came after Heraclitus picked up the term logos and actually identified it with the divine animating principle pervading the universe. Now, that's a lot of history, but I want to boil it down for you. I want you to take a second and just stop and think about this. The collective mind, the collective consciousness of humanity, all around that time, were moving together toward the same basic idea. And that is the purpose and hope that goes with it are not things that you find in various places. You see, this is something that a lot of people think, and it's a natural way for us to think. If I'm looking for a solution to this, I'll look here. If I'm looking for a solution to this, I'll look here. Security is found in X, love and belonging are found in Y, the meaning for suffering maybe is found in Z, and so I'm going to look for all these things, but rather the consensus of these people around 500 BC all came together to say that it makes more sense to see all of these things as residing in the same place, in the same entity, in the same principle, the same narrative, or as the Apostle John would come to say, in the same person. In John chapter 1, it says, "In the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The Logos became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth." See, John was the youngest disciple of Jesus. He was the one closest to him. If you see that painting of Leonardo da Vinci, The Last Supper, that's John that's right next to Jesus in that picture. When John saw Jesus, he heard him. He lived with him. He saw everything that he was doing, and everything became clear for John as he witnessed the life of Jesus. This Logos, this thing that made sense of everything in the universe, it wasn't just a principle, it wasn't just an idea, it was a person. It was God in human flesh, Jesus, this man that he was witnessing. You'll notice there it says in verse 4, "And that life was the light of all mankind." What was John saying there? John was saying he was the hope of the universe. He was the light of all mankind. Guys, this idea of true hope being found in Jesus really captured my attention as a young person, if I can get personal for a minute. Even when I was a kid in school and then in high school, I would look around me and I would see people that just didn't have a sense of real hope. They didn't have a sense of purpose in their life. As I did that, it really broke my heart, because those that know me well know that I really like people. Not everyone likes me, but I don't know if I've ever actually met a person that I didn't like. And I don't like seeing people suffer. When I see people, maybe that's why I became a pastor and didn't even realize it, but I have a heart for people, and I like to see them doing well, and I like to see them thriving, and I like to see them have hope and purpose. And when I looked around and saw people just moving through life with nothing more than their fingers crossed, it bothered me. There's so much more. And so my life mission quickly became trying to help people see Jesus as the source of true hope. And those that know me since I've gotten into ministry work, my style is more of being like a satisfied customer spokesperson than a preacher. It's just the way that I'm wired. I feel like I've experienced something amazing, and I just want to tell people about it. That wouldn't change about my life whether I was a full-time pastor or not. I just want people to know what I know. I want them to come to discover the hope that I have. And wherever you're watching from today, those that know me, those that don't, my wish for you is the same. It's that you would come to know the same hope that I've come to discover in my life. And over the past 2,000 years, you know what? Jesus Christ has been the world's go-to source for this solution type of hope that we're talking about this morning. Over 1 billion people today will be worshiping Jesus. They will be looking to him as their solution type of hope. Now, I understand that there is a certain leap of faith that needs to happen for a person to become a follower of Jesus. And that leap of faith seems pretty big for a lot of people. I understand. But I want to show you this morning that maybe that leap isn't as big as you think it is. I was talking actually with an old high school friend last week. He's been doing some amazing humanitarian work, and he gave me a call, and I was so happy. We talked for like an hour and a half. I love it when old friends just kind of check in, and this pandemic that we're in is allowing for more time for that kind of stuff. But we got chatting about a lot of stuff, and as often happens in deeper conversations, we got into some discussion on faith issues. And I just kind of said to him, I said, I think every faith system needs to have two components to it. He said, yeah, what are they? I said, well, the first component is that I think it needs to work in my own life. It needs to work in my life in ways that I can see and in ways that I can experience. And then the second step is, if it works in my life every time, then maybe, just maybe, I can trust it for bigger things that I can't see and that I can't experience. I think it's a really logical sort of two-step approach to faith. And I would encourage everyone actually toward that type of an approach. It's practical and it makes a lot of sense. Unfortunately, what happens is a lot of people, as they're looking into faith, as they're looking into Jesus, they end up looking at the wrong things. They'll focus on the church and they'll assume, you know what, the church, that it has all these problems, all these issues, and they will assume that Jesus can't be trusted because of what they see in the church. But they need to stop looking at the church and looking at Christ. Listen, let me remind you of something. It's called Christianity, not churchianity. Christianity, Christ. And you need to focus on Christ, not on the church. If you focus on Christ, what you will find out is that everything that he says is true. Everything that he teaches is accurate and it works. Jesus taught to love our enemies. And when you put that into practice, you find out it works. My life changes. My heart changes. He taught us to forgive people, even when they don't deserve forgiveness. He taught us to put others ahead of ourselves. And when you do that, you start doing it, your life becomes transformed. He taught us that if you will lose your life, then you will find it. And Jesus, we're celebrating on this day that he gave his actual physical life only to find it again. What a perfect example. His disciples, like John, got to witness his life and teachings firsthand. What an opportunity. John actually called him the Logos because his life and teachings made both rhyme and reason of everything that he could see in the world around him. John even witnessed Jesus' miracles firsthand. But you know what? This will be encouraging to you. Even John needed one final special event to take place to really put him over the edge and to make him a person of faith in Jesus forever. Maybe you caught that in the scripture reading this morning that Andrew read. In John chapter 20, verse 8, take note. You heard it this morning, but let me highlight it. When they were running to the tomb, John and Peter, John ran ahead because he was younger and he was faster. Peter, not so fast. But when they got there, Peter was the one that took risks and John was more shy. So Peter ran right in the tomb, but then John went in, and look at what he says. Finally, the other disciple, John, who had reached the tomb first, also went inside the tomb. He saw and believed. In that moment, John went in there and he looked and he saw the cloths that were laying there, and it clicked. He said, he actually is risen. And all of the words of Jesus, the things that he had predicted, came back to his mind. Guys, let's talk about the power of the resurrection this morning. You may be pleasantly surprised to know that even Jesus' own disciples didn't lock in their faith until after the resurrection. It's when the resurrection took place that everything took off, that the church began to grow, that the good news of Jesus started to spread like wildfire. And literally from that point, it just took over the entire known world at that time. You see, people saw Jesus' greatness. And I think many of you that are at home and you're watching here today, I think many of you acknowledge the greatness of Jesus. But these people, they just needed that final confirmation. Here's the deal. Jesus' perfect life, it proved that he was a moral soul, right? We can say that. His death on the cross proved that he was a loving soul. But listen, it's his resurrection that proved that he was and is the God of the universe. One thing you have to admit about resurrection, it looks really good on your resume. It says that you have the right to make outlandish claims like this: I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And that's not coming from an angry person or a judgmental person or an exclusive person. That is coming from the most moral and loving person that the world has ever seen. But he had the right to say it because he himself came back to life. He proved who he was. Guys, it's when you put the perfect life and the loving death and the astonishing resurrection of Jesus all together that your faith comes alive. I love the words of James C. Heffley. He was the founder of Hannibal Books, who made this quote. Listen to this. Here is a man who was born in an obscure village, the child of a peasant woman.
He worked in a carpenter shop until he was 30, and then for 3 years he was an itinerant preacher. He never wrote a book. He never held an office. He never owned a home. He never had a family. He never even went to college. He never put his foot inside a big city. He never traveled 200 miles from the place where he was born. He never did one of the things that usually accompany greatness. He had no credentials but himself. He had nothing to do with this world except the naked power of his divine manhood. While still a young man, the tide of popular opinion turned against him. He was turned over to his enemies. He went through the mockery of a trial. He was nailed to a cross between two thieves. His executioners gambled for the only piece of property he had on earth while he was dying, and that was his coat. When he was dead, he was taken down and laid in a borrowed grave through the pity of a friend. Such was his human life. He rises from the dead. 19 wide centuries have come and gone, and today he is the centerpiece of the human race and the leader of the column of progress. I am within the mark when I say that all the armies that ever marched, all the navies that were ever built, and all the parliaments that have ever sat, and all the kings that ever reigned put together have not affected the life of man upon this earth as powerfully as has that one solitary life. And this Easter, that one solitary life, Jesus is inviting you to start hoping in something solid. Something solid. To stop distracting yourself with carrots. At just kicking some can down the road. Something that will keep you distracted for another month, another year. This Easter, during this pandemic that none of us are ever going to forget, we're in a historic moment. But guys, I want to tell you something. This could be an even more historic moment for you today. It really could. This could be the day, and it's my prayer, that before this day is over, you would commit your life to Jesus. That you would admit He is the rhyme and reason of the universe. He is the Logos. He is the only one that can make sense of all of it. Him, Himself, together, everything in Him. There's this deception that I call the deception of 100% certainty. You're never going to be able to prove God completely in this life, to prove that Jesus is the Messiah completely in this life. And our fearful minds, you know what they do? They make us think that we need 100%. But the truth is, and you know this when you think logically, you can't have 100% certainty in anything. It's actually a very ridiculous way to live. It means that think about this, it means all you have to do is ever find 1% of doubt in something to cast it off and to write it off. That's how skeptics live, right? They find that 1% of something that they just can't wrap their minds around, they can't reconcile, and so they write off the whole thing. And I can tell you, it is a great way to ensure that you're a miserable person for your whole life, right? Because if you think that way, you'll never get married, you'll never take a job that actually interests you, you'll never take any kind of valuable risks, you'll never have children. There's so many things that you would never do if you thought that way. You can't have 100% certainty in anything. Literally 1 month ago, every one of you had 100% certainty that you would still have your job, that your kids would still be in school, and that you could go to the mall this week if you wanted to. But now where is that? Maybe this pandemic will help us to dispel this fantasy of 100% certainty. You don't have it. You will never have it in anything in this life. But here is the good news. Good news. Take a look. You don't need 100% certainty to follow Jesus. You don't. You don't. The truth is, no Christian, even if they say so, is 100% certain. We have doubts, but here's the thing. We have more reasons to believe than we do to doubt. You see, you don't need 100%. You know what you actually need? You need 51%. That's what you need. Everything changes at 51%. I call this the law of 51%. I remember in 1995, I had recently graduated from seminary. I was working in a church in the beautiful city of Trois-Rivières, Quebec. Shout out to all my friends in Quebec today. But I was living there. My wife and I had been married for just a couple of years, and we were living in the old part of town. And it was October the 30th, and all of the decorations for Halloween were out all over the place. But the thing that was more prominent as you walked the streets of Quebec that day were signs. And there were some really multicolored signs with nice graphics that said "we" on them, and there were other signs that were red and blue and kind of scary that said "no" on them. It was the referendum. And I remember sitting in my little apartment, my upstairs apartment. My wife even left to go to the neighbors to check it out. I have to be honest, I have friends and family through my wife who were separatists at the time, and I was not. And I was sitting in my apartment, I was watching, and I was saying, oh my goodness, it looks like our country may divide right here tonight. Now things swung back, and we pulled it through, those of us that are not separatists. But you know what? I learned something really important that night. I learned about the law of 51%, and it's an important law. You know, I know that none of you here have 100% certainty in terms of following Jesus. You can't. I understand that, and I know you don't have it. But I bet a lot of you have more reasons to follow Jesus than you have not to. You know, it makes me think of that old joke that we've all heard before. Two guys are walking in the woods, and they see this bear. And so one of the guys actually bends down, and he starts tightening up his shoelaces, and the other guy looks at him and says, "Are you crazy? You can't outrun a bear." The other guy looks up at him and he says, "I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you." Right? That's the law of 51%, right? That's what it is. You just need more reasons to believe, guys, than you have not to. One of the most famous characters in the resurrection story is Thomas. And you've heard the story before, but let me read it for you one more time from John chapter 20, the same chapter that we read from this morning, just at the end of the chapter. Picking it up at verse 24, listen to what it says. Now Thomas, called Didymus, he was a twin, that's what Didymus means, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and I put my finger where the nails were, and I put my hand into his side, I will not believe it." A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." And then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here, see my hands, reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." And then Jesus told him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and have yet believed." Jesus did many other miraculous signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book John is writing. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in his name. Guys, there are three things that I just want to highlight from that quick reading. The first is this. In verse 31, you'll see it says that John, this disciple who called Jesus the Logos, says that he wrote this book for us so that we may believe that he is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that we may have life in his name. And life encompasses that idea of hope. In verse 29, Jesus said, "Blessed are those who have not seen and have yet believed." And by that statement, we know that Jesus was saying that we do not need to have all of the evidence that Thomas had in order to make that decision. And the third thing I would draw your attention to are the words of Jesus in verse 27, where he says, "Stop doubting and believe." Guys, when the staff and I came up with this theme of fingers crossed for this message, I started studying a little bit. And I looked into where this gesture ever even came from in the first place. We know that it's this superstitious thing, and we know all of the different, ideas that are connected to that and how it's used today. Let me actually read what Wikipedia says. According to Wikipedia, the act of crossing one's fingers mainly belongs to Christianity. The earliest use of the gesture had two people crossing their index fingers to form a cross. And I read that and I said, go figure. No matter where you look in this universe, Jesus seems to be there guiding us. Guys, it breaks my heart to know that some of you are out there this morning, and with everything that you're going through right now, you're still doing this. This is all you've got. You're worried about your finances. You're worried about your security. And you're just biding your time. You're trying to get through these next few weeks and hope that everything will come back to normal so that you can just keep on going on as you were before. And my concern is that when this pandemic finally comes to an end, that you're just going to go right back to all of the same carrot hopes that you've been living with up till now. Shopping, vacations, sports, your career goals. And guys, none of that is bad. None of that is bad. But I'm telling you this morning, if that is what you're depending on for hope, for your solution type of hope in your world, you're in trouble. Because those things are not going to sustain you when disaster strikes. They're not going to sustain you when your health gives out, when your marriage breaks up, and when you're longing for purpose. Christ is the Logos, and he can make sense of your entire life if you let him. Stop doubting and believe. Guys, we want to leave you this morning with just a few kind of things that you can do to respond back to us. We want you to talk to us today, and we'll be checking in with everyone that decides to connect with us. We want you to kind of let us know where you fit in this picture, and you'll get instruction on this in just a second of how you can respond. But there's 3 kind of points here. If your hope is firmly in Jesus, let us know that today. Say, you know what, my hope is firmly in Jesus. I've settled this, and I'm confident in that relationship that I have with him. But maybe you're in category 2 here, where you'd say, you know what, I would like to talk with the pastor of putting my hope in Jesus. Or maybe even this morning during this live stream, I placed my hope in Jesus, and I just want to let you know that, and maybe I want to talk about that a little bit. We would love to hear from you. And the last one is, that maybe you've made this choice, and you're saying, I'm ready to declare the hope that I have in Jesus by being baptized, which is what baptism is for. We would also love to hear from you. Let me pray for you this morning as we wrap up, and then we're going to have a little extra time here together. Father, I just thank you for what you're doing in our hearts this morning. This is a historic time and a historic day during that time. And Lord, it could be a historic moment for a lot of people today. For people that need assurance, that need more of an expectancy type of hope than a fantasy type of hope, that are looking for something that has substance to it. Lord, you've given us such great evidence that you are real. You had so many people record your life and to witness what you did. We number our years after your life. We can't miss you. And yet, Lord, there's this leap of faith that stares us in the face. Lord, I pray that people today would not be looking at the 100%. They'd look at the 51%. That they'd realize there's so many more reasons to believe in you than to not believe. That they would move into the zone of being a hopeful person rather than a hopeless person. And that they would allow you to start leading them and teaching them and showing them how you can make their life meaningful and purposeful in the here and now and give them assurance for the life that comes after this. Lord, that's my prayer for each one today, and I pray that you would just bless them in Jesus' name.